As my sister smiled at the altar, she pointed at me and said, "You're not even part of this family." And in that moment, the entire room turned against me, leaving me humiliated in front of everyone I loved. But what happened next would turn her perfect wedding into my perfect revenge. The grand ballroom at the Riverside Hotel had been transformed into something out of a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across ivory silk drapes, while thousands of white roses created a garden of elegance that must have cost more than most people's annual salary. The air was thick with the intoxicating blend of expensive perfume, fresh flowers, and the kind of anticipation that only comes with witnessing someone's happiest day. I stood near the back, smoothing down my burgundy bridesmaid dress, the one my sister Emma had chosen specifically because, as she put it, "It won't make you look too pretty." I should have seen the warning signs then, but I was too caught up in the joy of seeing my little sister finally getting her dream wedding. After all, I had helped make it possible. The irony wasn't lost on me as I watched her glide down the aisle in her $10,000 gown. I had worked double shifts for 8 months to help pay for this wedding, sacrificing my own savings and even selling my car to contribute to what she called our family's biggest moment. I had spent countless weekends addressing invitations, arranging flowers, and coordinating with vendors, all while she lounged in bed or went shopping with her friends. Growing up, I had always been Emma's protector and supporter. When she struggled in school, I spent my evenings tutoring her through algebra and chemistry. When she got into trouble, I covered for her with our parents. When she needed money for college applications, spring break trips, or that designer handbag she absolutely had to have, I was the one who quietly transferred funds from my modest savings account. I told myself it was what big sisters did. I convinced myself that her success was my success, that her happiness justified my sacrifices. Even when she started dating Marcus, a pompous investment banker who looked at me like I was something he'd scrape off his shoe, I smiled and welcomed him into our family because Emma loved him. Our childhood hadn't always been easy. Dad worked long hours at the factory, and Mom juggled 2 part-time jobs to keep us afloat. As the older sister, I naturally fell into the role of caretaker, making sure Emma had lunch money when our parents forgot, helping her with homework when they were too exhausted, and shielding her from the worst of our family's financial stress. I remember the night when Emma was 12 and I was 16, sitting on her bed as she cried about not having the right clothes for the school dance. Without hesitation, I gave her my babysitting money, 3 months' worth of savings I had been collecting for a class trip. The smile that lit up her face when she realized she could buy that dress made every sacrifice feel worthwhile. That pattern continued through high school and college. When Emma wanted to join the expensive private art program, I worked extra shifts at the diner to help cover the costs our parents couldn't afford. When she needed a laptop for college, I sold my guitar, the one gift I had bought myself with my first real paycheck. When she studied abroad in Paris, I took on a second job to help fund her cultural experience. The ceremony was picture-perfect until the moment that would replay in my nightmares for months to come. As the officiant asked if anyone objected to the union, Emma turned toward the congregation with a radiant smile. But instead of the traditional moment of silence, she did something that froze my blood in my veins. She pointed directly at me, her perfectly manicured finger extended like an accusation, and her voice carried clearly through the chapel's sound system. "Actually, before we continue, I need to address something. My sister here thinks she's part of this family, but honestly, she's not even worthy of being in this room." The collective gasp from 300 wedding guests created a sound like wind rushing through a canyon. I felt my face burn with embarrassment as every eye in the room turned to stare at me. My parents, seated in the front row, looked mortified, but remained silent. My cousins' mouths fell open in shock. Even the wedding photographer stopped taking pictures, his camera lowering as he processed what was happening. But Emma wasn't finished. As the music continued to play softly in the background, she leaned into the microphone and whispered something to Marcus that was clearly intended for everyone to hear. "She's always been a failure, living in my shadow, and I've had to deal with her pathetic attempts to matter my entire life." The words hit me like physical blows. Each syllable was carefully chosen to inflict maximum damage, and the public nature of the humiliation made it exponentially worse. I could hear the whispers starting to ripple through the crowd, see the mixture of pity and secondhand embarrassment on faces I had known since childhood. Marcus's family, wealthy, influential people who had never hidden their disdain for what they considered my family's modest circumstances, began to chuckle. His mother, dripping in diamonds and designer everything, leaned over to whisper something to the woman beside her, and suddenly their entire section was alive with barely suppressed laughter. "Can you believe she actually thought she mattered here?" Marcus's mother said, her voice carrying just loud enough for me to hear over the murmur of the crowd. Uneducated, desperate, and now a complete joke in front of everyone who matters. Her husband nodded sagely, adjusting his platinum cufflinks as he added, "I told Marcus he should have insisted on a different wedding party. This is what happens when you associate with people like that." The most devastating part wasn't the strangers laughing at my expense. It was watching my own family's reaction. My parents sat frozen, their faces pale with shock, but they didn't stand up for me. They didn't object or defend me or even look in my direction. My aunts and uncles shifted uncomfortably in their seats, studying their programs as if they contained the secrets of the universe. Even my younger cousins, who I had babysitted and helped with homework for years, avoided eye contact. Uncle Robert, who I had helped move house 3 times in the past 2 years, suddenly found his shoes fascinating. Aunt Linda, whose wedding shower I had organized and paid for just last summer, busied herself with adjusting her purse strap. Cousin Jake, who still owed me $500 from his last emergency, turned his entire body away from me as if my humiliation might be contagious. I stood there in my ugly burgundy dress, feeling every laugh pierce through my chest like a knife. The humiliation was complete and total, not just because of what Emma had said, but because of what everyone else hadn't said. The silence of the people who should have defended me was somehow worse than the cruelty of those who attacked me. My hands began to shake, and I could feel tears threatening to spill down my cheeks. The logical part of my brain screamed at me to leave, to walk out of that chapel with whatever dignity I had left, and never look back. But something else kept my feet planted firmly on the marble floor. A growing realization that this moment wasn't an accident or a momentary lapse in judgment. This was calculated, planned, designed to destroy me in the most public way possible. Through my shock, I began to notice details that painted a clearer picture of the conspiracy against me. Emma's maid of honor, Jessica, was smirking behind her bouquet. Marcus's groomsmen were exchanging knowing looks, as if they had been expecting this moment. Even the wedding planner seemed unsurprised, checking her clipboard with the efficiency of someone following a predetermined script. I managed to make it through the rest of the ceremony in a haze of shock and disbelief. When Emma and Marcus kissed to seal their union, the applause felt mocking. When they walked down the aisle as husband and wife, Emma's smile in my direction was triumphant, almost predatory. She had orchestrated this moment perfectly, turning what should have been a celebration of love into a public execution of my dignity. During the cocktail hour, I retreated to the hotel's garden balcony, desperate for air that didn't feel thick with judgment and whispered gossip. The cool evening breeze against my flushed skin was the first relief I had felt in hours. The city sparkled below me, completely oblivious to the personal earthquake that had just shattered my world. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from friends who had heard about the incident through social media, because, of course, someone had posted videos of my humiliation online. The hashtags were already trending. Wedding drama, nos sister shade, nos family feud. I ignored every notification, unable to face the pity or the questions or the awkward attempts at comfort. Instead, I opened a folder on my phone that I had labeled Family Stuff, a collection of screenshots, photos, and documents that I had been unconsciously gathering for months. Text messages where Emma had lied to our parents about her whereabouts while asking me to cover for her. Bank statements showing the money she had borrowed from me and never repaid. Photos of her with other men while she was supposedly committed to Marcus. As I scrolled through the evidence of her deception and manipulation, memories began flooding back with painful clarity. The time she had convinced our parents that I had crashed her car when it was actually her drunk driving that caused the accident. The way she had systematically turned my high school friends against me by spreading rumors about my alleged jealousy of her popularity. The college recommendation letter she had stolen from my guidance counselor and submitted under her own name. Each memory added fuel to a fire that was building inside my chest. This wasn't just about tonight's humiliation. It was about 20 years of systematic manipulation and betrayal. Emma had spent our entire lives positioning herself as the golden child, while casting me as the disappointing older sister who couldn't measure up. That's when I realized that Emma had made a critical error. She had humiliated me in front of everyone, yes, but she had also given me a captive audience. In a few hours, when the reception began, and everyone was relaxed and celebrating, they would all be gathered in one room, expecting speeches and toasts and heartfelt moments. What they would get instead was the truth. Over the past several months leading up to this moment, I had done something Emma never would have expected from her pathetic older sister. I had prepared. Not for revenge initially, but for self-preservation. I had started documenting her behavior after she had convinced our parents to loan her money for a business investment that I suspected was fraudulent. What began as simple record-keeping had evolved into a comprehensive archive of Emma's deceptions. I had screenshots of her dating profiles that were active throughout her engagement to Marcus, bank records showing her siphoning money from our grandmother's medical fund while Grandma Rose was battling cancer, voice recordings of phone calls where she plotted to sabotage job opportunities for me because she was worried I might upstage her in our parents' eyes. Every cruel comment she had made, every lie she had told, every way she had manipulated our family for her own benefit was carefully documented and organized. I wasn't acting out of pure emotion anymore. I was strategizing with the precision of a chess master who had been studying her opponent's moves for years. I spent those weeks creating a presentation that would reveal exactly who Emma really was beneath her perfect exterior. I gathered evidence of the affairs she had hidden from Marcus, the money she had stolen from family members, the lies she had told to get me fired from a job she wanted for her friend. Each piece of information was verified, cross-referenced, and prepared for maximum impact. The most delicious part was that Emma had unknowingly helped me by insisting on such an elaborate wedding. The same audio-visual equipment she had rented to display their romantic slideshow could just as easily display something far more revealing. The same microphone she had used to humiliate me would become the instrument of her downfall. I had even practiced my presentation, timing each revelation for maximum impact, ensuring that the emotional journey would take the audience from shock to disgust to understanding. I wasn't planning to destroy her out of spite. I was planning to reveal the truth that our family had been too blind or too afraid to see. The reception hall buzzed with the energy of 300 people determined to have a good time, despite the awkwardness of the ceremony. The champagne flowed freely, and the earlier tension seemed to dissipate as guests focused on the open bar and the elaborate dinner spread. Crystal glasses clinked against fine china as servers in crisp white uniforms circulated with trays of hors d'oeuvres that cost more per bite than most people spent on lunch. Emma worked the room like the consummate performer she had always been, graciously accepting congratulations while managing to work in little digs about my embarrassing behavior throughout the evening. I watched her from across the room, marveling at how effortlessly she lied to people's faces. She told Marcus's business partners that I had always been jealous of her success, painting herself as the long-suffering sister who had tried everything to help me find my way. She informed our family friends that I had been acting erratically lately, suggesting that my outburst during the ceremony was just the latest in a pattern of unstable behavior that had been concerning everyone for months. To our elderly relatives, she portrayed herself as the responsible daughter who had been forced to shoulder the burden of my failures. She even managed to work up fake tears while describing how difficult it had been to include me in the wedding party, knowing how unpredictable I could be, but feeling obligated out of family loyalty. What she didn't notice was that I had quietly spoken to the AV technician during dinner, explaining that I had a surprise presentation for the happy couple. The young man, clearly eager to please and earn his tip, was more than happy to help me upload my files to the presentation system. What she didn't see was me testing the remote control while she was distracted by the photographer, ensuring that every slide would display clearly on the massive screen behind the head table. What she couldn't have anticipated was that her pathetic sister had learned a few things about planning and execution during all those years of cleaning up her messes and organizing events she took credit for. The dinner progressed through multiple courses of artisanal cuisine that Emma had insisted on despite the astronomical cost. Guests laughed at the best man's jokes, applauded the maid of honor's sentimental speech, and raised their glasses in toast after toast to the happy couple's future together. I sat at my assigned table, notably placed at the back of the room, as far from the head table as possible, and watched the proceedings with the detached calm of someone who knew exactly how the evening would end. My table mates, a mix of distant relatives and Marcus's work colleagues, made polite conversation that carefully avoided mentioning the ceremony's unusual moment. The perfect moment came during the toasts, just after Marcus's best man had finished a rambling speech about love and commitment that was heavy on insider jokes and light on sincerity. Emma stood at the head table, glowing with satisfaction and champagne, completely confident in her victory over me. The room was relaxed, happy, and completely unprepared for what was about to happen. I stood up from my table in the back, my heart pounding with a mixture of terror and anticipation. The conversations around me gradually died down as people noticed me moving toward the front of the room. By the time I reached the microphone, the silence was complete, broken only by the soft background music and the clink of nervous glasses being set down on tables. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, surprised by how steady my voice sounded through the sound system. "I know this is unusual, but I have something important to share with all of you tonight." Emma's face went from confusion to concern, to outright alarm in the span of 3 seconds. She started to stand, probably to stop me, but Marcus placed a hand on her arm, clearly thinking this was some kind of reconciliation attempt, or perhaps a surprise tribute to make up for the awkwardness of the ceremony. I pressed a button on the remote I had palmed, and the large screen behind me flickered to life. Instead of wedding photos or romantic messages, bank statements appeared. Clear, undeniable proof of the money Emma had systematically stolen from our grandmother's medical fund while Grandma Rose was undergoing cancer treatment. The numbers were stark and damning. $15,000 withdrawn over 6 months, supposedly for medical expenses, but the corresponding receipts showed payments to luxury retailers, spa treatments, and vacation bookings. The room went dead silent as 300 guests processed the implications of what they were seeing. "You see," I continued, my voice carrying clearly through the sound system, "my sister called me a failure tonight, in front of all of you. She said I didn't matter, that I wasn't worthy of being part of this family. But I think it's time you all knew who the real failure in our family has been." Click. The next slide showed screenshots of text messages between Emma and her personal trainer. Intimate, explicit messages that left nothing to the imagination. The timestamps showed these conversations had continued right up until the week before the wedding, with Emma making plans to meet him at hotels while Marcus was traveling for business. Gasps rippled through the crowd like a wave. Marcus's face went white as he read his new wife's messages to another man. Messages that detailed activities and emotions that should have been reserved for him alone. His mother clutched her pearl necklace as if it might anchor her to reality, while his father's face turned an alarming shade of purple. "She told you I was jealous of her success," I said, advancing to the next slide, which showed Emma's actual financial situation in devastating detail. Credit card statements revealed massive debt, defaulted loans, and a recently bounced check for the wedding flowers. Bank records showed a pattern of taking money from family members under false pretenses, including loans that were never repaid, and gifts that were obtained through manipulation and lies. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the sound of chairs creaking as people shifted uncomfortably. Emma finally found her voice, standing up so quickly that her chair toppled backward. "Turn that off! Turn it off right now!" she screamed, her carefully applied makeup beginning to run as tears of rage and panic streamed down her face. But her panic only made the evidence more damning. Her desperate attempts to stop the presentation confirmed to everyone watching that the information was accurate and devastating. I clicked to the final slide, a compilation of photos showing Emma with various men over the past year, including one particularly compromising image taken just last month at a hotel downtown. The photo was timestamped and geotagged, providing irrefutable proof of her infidelity. "You've all seen me humiliated tonight," I said, my voice remaining calm despite the chaos erupting around me. "You watched as my own family sat silent while I was torn apart in public. But now you can see what the truth actually looks like." The aftermath was swift and brutal. Marcus stood frozen, staring at the screen with the expression of a man whose world was collapsing in real time. His carefully planned future, his investment in what he thought was a perfect wife, his reputation among his colleagues and family, everything was crumbling before his eyes. Emma's new mother-in-law was on her feet, pointing and shouting something about family honor and how they had been deceived by gold-digging liars. Other guests were pulling out their phones, some to capture the drama unfolding before them, others to frantically text updates to friends who hadn't attended the wedding. Our parents sat in stunned silence, finally seeing their golden daughter's true nature displayed in high definition for everyone to witness. The cognitive dissonance was written across their faces as they struggled to reconcile the Emma they thought they knew with the evidence of her systematic manipulation and betrayal. Emma herself seemed to shrink before my eyes, her perfect wedding dress suddenly looking like a costume in a play where she had forgotten her lines. The confidence and cruelty that had radiated from her just hours earlier evaporated, leaving behind someone who looked very small and very frightened. I didn't stay to watch the complete meltdown. I had said what I came to say, and the truth was now out there for everyone to see. As I walked toward the exit, I could hear the chaos erupting behind me. Shouting, crying, the sounds of chairs scraping against marble as people stood to get a better view of the disaster unfolding at the head table. The last thing I saw before the ballroom doors closed behind me was Marcus ripping off his boutonniere and storming toward the exit, with his parents close behind him. Emma was collapsed in her chair, her perfect updo falling apart as she buried her face in her hands, finally experiencing the kind of public humiliation she had inflicted on me just hours earlier. By morning, the story had spread far beyond the wedding guests. Social media exploded with hashtags and commentary as videos of the presentation went viral. The local society pages picked up the story of the wedding that ended in family scandal, and gossip blogs across the internet dissected every detail of Emma's downfall. But I felt no joy in her destruction. There was only a quiet satisfaction in knowing that the truth had finally been told, that years of gaslighting and manipulation had been exposed for what they really were. I hadn't destroyed Emma. I had simply revealed who she had always been underneath the pretty dresses and practiced smiles. The consequences were swift and far-reaching. Marcus filed for annulment within a week, citing fraud and deception. Several family members who had been manipulated by Emma over the years came forward with their own stories of her lies and theft. Our grandmother, finally understanding why her medical fund had been mysteriously depleted, pressed charges for elder abuse. As I packed my things to leave town for a while, letting the dust settle and the gossip die down, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "You think this is over? You have no idea who's been watching everything you've done." I stared at the screen for a long moment, then smiled. After everything I had been through, after all the battles I had fought and won, the idea of another challenge didn't scare me anymore. If someone else wanted to play games with me, they would quickly learn what Emma had learned too late, that underestimating the quiet sister was the biggest mistake they could make. The game was far from over, and I was just getting started.